Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Starting the Conversation About Drugs. We are excited to have Beth Mohaupt here today with us. Beth is a substance abuse prevention specialist from the Office of Student and Safety Wellness here at FCPS. Thank you for being here, and I will now turn it over to you, Beth.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much to the Family Resource Center for inviting me to come and talk today about this very important topic, okay? And also, thank you to parents and your caregivers and families for taking your time this morning to attend this presentation. Today, we're going to talk about starting the conversation about drugs. So, stressed, nervous, confused, uncomfortable. These might be a few words that may describe how parents or caregivers feel about talking to their children about drugs or other difficult topics, right? And I want you to know that these are all completely normal feelings and emotions, right? Whenever we're dealing with taboo or uncomfortable issues. However, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable or stressful, right? The more prepared and comfortable you are, the easier the discussion will be as your children get older, right? So hopefully after this presentation, you'll feel a little bit more prepared and a little bit more confident about starting this discussion with your kids. So today our objectives are we're going to learn how to start the conversation about drugs. Okay, I'm going to give you tips on how to start the conversation with children as young as 4 years old, right? And we're going to talk about like going through the teenage years. So from itty bitties to, through your teenagers. We're going to talk about different scenarios that may come up and how you can handle them. And we are going to learn strategies for prevention. So I'm going to give you some information about risk factors for substance abuse and addiction, as well as very realistic, real life strategies that you can put into place to aid in reducing those risk factors. So I know a lot of people say, like, hey, Beth, my child is only like 5 years old or might be 9 years old. Isn't that a little bit young to start talking to them about drugs? And so my answer is absolutely not, right? Because education about drugs can start as early as 4 years old. And the earlier that you start, first of all, the more effective the discussions will be, and the easier it will be as your child gets older, okay? So I want you to think of it as planting the seeds now for a more successful future. So starting prevention as early as possible, so your student may be less likely to use drugs or alcohol as they end up getting older, right? So it's important also to remember that the conversation about drugs is not a one-time thing. It is not one and done, right? It's going to be an evolving conversation that is going to get a little bit more in depth as our kids get older. So instead of having one 60-minute conversation, I want you to think about having 61-minute conversations. Okay, so little bits here and there, more consistent messaging is going to be better and more helpful. So we're starting right now by planting those seeds so that these future conversations might be a little bit easier for you. So before we start talking about the tips for starting the conversation, I do want to talk to you a little bit about overall substance use trends here in FCPS, okay? So most people, whether it's children or adults, teenagers, people tend to think that drug use is a lot more common or frequent than it actually is, okay? So I don't know about you, but I hear all the time from my own children and from kids at school is that everybody is vaping, right? Or for older kids, everybody is drinking. It's really important to understand that most students do not use substances of any kind, okay? So as a matter of fact, you can see some data from the Fairfax County Youth Survey, which determined that 88% of students in the county do not use any substances at all. So it's really important that we remember this. So whenever we're talking to our kids about drug use, we need to let them know that most people do not use drugs of any kind. So making sure that they know that the social norm is not to use. All right. So tips for starting the conversation. First of all, calm yourself. Okay. I know that it can be really uncomfortable, but you want to approach the conversation as like calmly and as confidently as is possible. All right. Because you're going to be setting the tone for that discussion, but also for future discussions. So if you come into the conversation nervous or upset, first of all, your kid knows that, right? They can feel that. They feed off of us and off of our energy. And it'll set an uncomfortable tone, as well as may put your child on the defensive. Okay, so we want to approach it as calmly as possible. And later on, I'm going to give you some tips on how to like learn about calming ourselves. The second tip is to make sure it's an appropriate time to have the conversation. All right. So if you've had a bad day, or if you're like super tense, it's not going to be a good time to talk to your child about any important topic, right? Because again, we want to make sure that we are calm and we are in the right mind frame to have that conversation. But also making sure that your child is in a place to hear it. So making sure that they're in a decent mood and they're going to be as receptive as possible to you talking to them, right? We also want to make sure that you have adequate time to have this discussion. So we don't want to try and rush to have this conversation whenever, we have 2 minutes to get to the soccer game, right? Or we're about to start our bedtime routine. So making sure that we're in a good place to have it, as well as we have enough time so that we can adequately talk to our children. Okay, another tip is you start the conversation and bring it up before they do. Okay. It is so important to start the conversation with your kids at an early age and before they bring it up to you. Okay. Because if you wait until they bring it up, that means that they've been exposed to it in some way. So maybe they've heard something from peers, right? Or they've seen something. But either way, we want to make sure that you are giving them the information, right? Because if they're hearing things from their peers, they may not have gotten accurate information. I will tell you that kids are the first ones to give their peers wrong information. They don't do it on purpose, right? But they might say, "Hey, why don't you use this vape? It's going to help you calm down." Okay. So, by starting the conversation and by talking to them first, you can control the information that they get, and you can make sure that the information that they do get is going to be accurate. Okay. So try not to avoid questions. Okay, you want to answer all of the questions that they have because we want to promote open communication, right? We want to show that we're listening to their concerns, and we do that by listening to what they have to say and answering the questions that they may have. So my take on it is if they're old enough to ask a question, they're old enough for an age appropriate response, right? So it's up to you to determine what is age appropriate for your child and what they can handle, but trying to make sure that you answer the questions that they do have is going to be really important. Now, I understand you're, not an expert on drugs or anything, so you may not know the answer, and that's okay. You can Google it together. Kids love to like teach their parents about things, right? So getting on Google and like looking for the answer of their question, making sure that it's an appropriate site, right? Not a drug site that's promoting drug use, but one with actual information. So you can Google it together, or if you don't know and you don't feel comfortable Googling it with your child, then you can always say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, but let me look it up, and then I'll get back to you later, right? Because then you're listening, right? And you're showing them that it is important that they're getting the correct and adequate information instead of brushing them off and say, oh, I don't know, so I guess, that's it. I don't know. But coming back later and addressing those things, again, shows that you are promoting that open communication and that you care that they get the right information. Approach the conversation with curiosity. Okay, so we want to have a conversation with our children, right? We don't want to give them a lecture because what happens if we lecture? They're going to shut down and they're not going to listen, right? So listen to what they have to say. Ask them what they know about the drug or addiction or whatever the topic is that you guys are talking about. Okay. So listening, letting them ask questions. approaching it because we want to know, what do you know and what do you need to know? Remember, we want your student to be as comfortable as possible talking to you about these different topics. All right, trying to have the conversation privately or one-on-one. Okay, I know that it may be difficult getting a little bit of one-on-one time, but with any big discussion like this, any important topic, we want to make sure that your child feels comfortable asking questions, right? And it might be a little bit more uncomfortable if there are other people around while you're talking. So whether it's their siblings or whether it's another adult. So, just trying to find that one-on-one time. Personally, I have three children myself, okay? So I found that some of our best discussions are happening in the car. It takes off a lot of pressure because we're more not face to face, right? They don't have to kind of look me in the eyes. So we're seated side by side, or, if my child's younger, they're in the back, right? So we're able to kind of talk a little bit more openly. Or like going out for ice cream, right? What kid doesn't love to go out for ice cream? So I find personally that that's been a really good time to talk to my children about things. Another option is like doing an activity together. I find both as a mother and as a therapist, whenever you're doing activities that involve your hands, so like playing with Legos or playing with Play-Doh, children will talk more and they will open up whenever they are doing something with their hands, right? They don't even realize, but they are just chatty Cathys. And finally, use teachable moments. So these are perfect times to help us start that conversation. Okay, if we don't know where to start, these teachable moments are the best times to do that. So teachable moments are unplanned events, right? Things that happen in a day that can help our child to learn, right? So what we're going to do is over the next few slides, we're going to be talking about different scenarios that may come up and how you can use these moments as learning time for starting the conversation. Okay, so the first scenario, the first teachable moment is maybe you are giving your child medication or vitamins or a prescription, so giving them any type of medication. So this is actually the perfect time to start the conversation. So I want you to think about from like age 4, they can understand the purpose of the medication. Okay, so explaining to them why they are taking their medication. So, for example, I'm giving you this vitamin so that you can stay healthy, right? So that your body stays healthy. Or I'm giving you this cough syrup because you've had a bad cough and we're taking it like it says on the label, right? So, explaining why they are getting the medicine is important so they can understand that we don't take medicine just because, that we take medicine for specific reasons. So, discuss the appropriate use of meds. So, again, even from 4 years old, talking about how to use that medication appropriately. So, even a 4-year-old can understand I only take one vitamin, right? Or we don't take anybody else's medicine. Grandma takes a pill every day for her heart, and we don't take other people's medicine. Okay. So, even young kids can understand that. You can say other people may take medicine for different things, but we can get sick if we take medicine that's not for us. So, explaining some of those consequences if we take medicine that we're not supposed to. Okay. And so for older children, just kind of addressing how taking medicine outside of recommended doses can damage the body or cause more harm. So we're giving more detail on, if you take more Tylenol than you're supposed to, then it can damage our liver or our kidneys or whatever. Okay, so giving them more information as they age. And finally, identify the name of trusted adults who are allowed to give them medication. Okay, so it's important to identify the adults by name so they know who is trusted by you. Okay, because if you say, and a trusted adult can give you medicine, they might think that a trusted adult is their best friend's 16-year-old brother, who may or may not be a trusted adult. Okay. So, like for my kids, I'm very specific. I tell my 11-year-old the only person that can give you medicine is mom and grandma and, older sister Jasmine, because she's 20 years old, as well as school nurse Rachel. Okay. So, I'm very specific about who is allowed to give them medicine. And if anybody else tries to give you medicine, we don't take it. So, again, telling like that to younger and older children, making sure that they realize that not everybody is allowed to give them medicine. So, for older children and teenagers, talking about the importance of not taking any medicine or pills or anything from any peers or adult that is not trusted by you. Okay, so again, giving more detail about the potential harms of taking medications that they're not supposed to. Okay, so another scenario. So maybe there is substance use shown in the media. So it could be on a TV show or in a movie. Maybe there's information in the news about one of their favorite, like stars, talking about drugs or alcohol. So the situation that I'm gonna use in this scenario is like I want you to think about Looney Tunes cartoons, right? So we saw that cartoon with like the cat and she drank the bottle and then she's walking around all tipsy, right? You can tell that the cat clearly drank alcohol or some substance and is showing signs of being drunk. Okay, so I'm going to use that example whenever I'm talking about this in particular. So, how you can handle this situation, right? Is ask, what do you think is going on in this situation? Okay. So, what do you think is happening? If you're asking a question like that, what do you think is going on? What do you think is happening to the cat? This lets you tell them what they know about drugs, right? So you're opening it up to find out what information that they know and what they think about it, right? So that's an easy in. Just like, what do you think is going on? What do you think is happening? You can talk about the choices. So talk about the choices that the person or the character made due to the substance use. Okay. So again, back to our drunk cat, talking about how, okay, well, that cat, drank this bottle and then now they're acting, these are the choices that they're making. What do you think about that? What do you think about these choices? Asking about their views and knowledge about drugs. Okay, so again, kind of figuring out what do they know about alcohol or whatever drug is in question. And again, keeping yourself calm and listening with an open mind. So, this can be really tough whenever you're talking to older children or teenagers because some of the information that they have can be pretty hard for us to hear, right? Especially whenever they're talking about vaping or something and they're like, oh, that's super cool. But I digress. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So, but just asking them what is their view and starting to address the impact that drugs may have on people's lives, right? So, especially whenever we're talking about like older children, talking about how, it can affect their bodies or how it can affect their choices, particularly if you can give an example of people that they know, right? Then they can kind of create that connection, right? Because if it's just kind of an abstract idea, they might not quite connect it, they might not quite understand. But if you can give a specific example of a person in their life, be like, oh, remember, grandma used to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, and, her health was really bad because of it. She had a hard time breathing or whatever, right? So making those connections so that children and teenagers can really kind of understand how it actually impacts them. And our third scenario, another good time is to start the conversation is if you see somebody like smoking or vaping in public, right? So you're walking, you're going to the mall and, there's somebody on the sidewalk that either has a cigarette or might have a vape device. So, explaining the health impacts and consequences of smoking. So, even to a young child, right, you can talk about how it hurts their body, right? So, a 4 year old say, oh, if you smoke or you vape, it can really hurt your lungs. And if you are, maybe connecting it a little bit more, if they have like asthma or something else like that, saying, oh, how you have asthma, people who vape, it makes it harder for them to breathe. Okay, so again, kind of making those connections. And again, for older children, going into a little bit more detail about like some of those impacts on how it can affect their body and their health, right? You can talk about adult choices, right? So explaining how sometimes adults might make choices that aren't healthy for their bodies, right? And promoting more positive choices. So, talking to them about, even though some people make these choices, you can make better choices and keep your body healthy. And here are some healthier choices, right? So, eating right and getting exercise. So, we're giving them alternatives to that behavior. Okay. Again, asking their opinion on the topic. So, what do you know about vaping? I think what you're going to find really super interesting for children, right? Especially like older children and teenagers, they ask about their opinion specifically about smoking and vaping. So a lot of like preteens and teenagers actually think smoking is super gross. So if you talk to them about cigarettes, they're like, "Ooh, that is super gross." Right? But then they're like, "Ooh, vaping, that's cool because it smells good, right? It looks cool." And so, kind of addressing those things, letting them know that vaping and smoking are exactly the same thing, and they're going to cause the same types of damage to the body. Okay, so addressing those misconceptions is going to be really, really important, letting them know that they can both damage your lungs, they can both damage your health, right? And setting expectations and values. So, talking to them about, I expect you not to smoke. Okay, because I want you to be healthy, because, whatever values and morals that your family has, whatever reasons your family has, kind of setting it out there, letting them know, like, I really don't want you to do these things because I want you to be as healthy as possible. Okay. So, we just talked about how tips to how to start the conversation, right? So, what we're going to talk about now are different risk factors for substance abuse and addiction, because I think that this is really important for you to know because we're about to talk about protective factors, right? So, prevention stuff. So, the things that put people more at risk for substance abuse and addiction. So, environment. So, if it is in a person's environment, that increases their risks. So, whether that is in the family household or if it is in their friend group, or if it's in their community, right? So, if something is more widely used by more people and they're around it and they're seeing it and they have access to it, that is going to increase risks, right? Family history and genetics. So, if there is a family history of substance use or addiction, then that is something that your students absolutely need to know. Now, that's not a conversation that we have with a 4 year old, but it might be something that a conversation that we start at like 9, 10 years old, letting people know, like, hey, we have this history of addiction in our family because they need to be aware, right? Because we know that family history or genetics actually increases somebody's risks up to like 75%. All right. So addiction and risk is, or I'm sorry, addiction, family history is a huge risk factor for addiction. Unaddressed mental health concerns or trauma. So, unaddressed anxiety or depression, any traumatic events that they've been through and they haven't gotten any type of help or haven't processed through it, that is also an increased risk factor, okay, for substance use. Low self-esteem. So, not knowing how they feel about themselves, not knowing who they are. A lack of skills is risk factor. So, not knowing how to say no to their peers, not feeling comfortable and confident enough to be able to refuse things. and a lack of connections with others. So this is one of the biggest risk factors is whenever somebody feels like they don't have a group to belong to, right? Because then what we find sometimes is that, well, what I've heard from a lot of from students that I've worked with is that if they feel disconnected, they feel like there's nowhere that they belong, but somebody offers them, a vape or other drugs or whatever, and you can come into my group and vape with us or use these other drugs, then it kind of gives them a group, right? Whether it's a group that only uses drugs together, um, it doesn't matter because then they at least feel that sense of belonging. Okay, so all of these increase risks of substance use and addiction as a person gets older. So why do I talk about that? Okay, is because prevention strategies. Okay, so we already discussed tips on how to start the conversation about drugs. We discussed teachable moments with everyday scenarios and how to talk to our kids through those teachable moments, right? We talked about risk factors. So now we're going to discuss prevention strategies. Things that you can do as a parent to reduce the likelihood that your child will use drugs or alcohol as they get older. Okay. And it is so much easier to kind of put these strategies into place as early as possible when your student is young, right? Because then it becomes a habit or a routine as they get older. It's so much more difficult putting these things in place later. So, one thing that I wanted to bring up to your attention is the Fairfax County Youth Survey. So, I'm not sure if you're familiar about this survey, but it's done every single year in even grades, like starting from like sixth grade. So, sixth grade, eighth grade, 10th graders, and 12th graders. Every single student in Fairfax County is given this youth survey during like advisory periods every single year. Okay. So, this survey asks questions about different risky behaviors, including drug use. And it talks about the positive things, so protective factors, things that people have positive in their life. So, the outcome talked about the importance of these protective factors. So, to be clear, protective factors are assets. These are things that a person has that can reduce risk that a person faces. Okay, so these are prevention. These are things that we put into place for prevention. So, through the Fairfax County Youth Survey, right, they determined a campaign called Three to Succeed. So, they determined that students who have that three or more protective factors are more likely to manage stress and to make better choices and develop healthy habits. Okay, so protective factors are increasing all of these positive things, and students who have three or more protective factors are much less likely to engage in risky behaviors, such as using drugs. Okay, so a lot of the prevention strategies that I'm going to discuss are protective factors. These are things that you can do as a parent, very, easy, relatable things to put into place to help your students be more successful. Okay, so the first thing is to provide parental supervision. Okay, so giving supervision is a huge protective factor against substance use and other risky behaviors, right? So it's important to know where your child is, who they're with, when they're coming home, right? So we need to know where they are at all times because they're less likely to be doing something they're not supposed to be doing. Knowing your child's friends is also really important, right? Because, I mean, whenever they're young, right, we are the most important person in their lives. But as our students get older, peers start having just as much of an influence on them, or even more so, right? As they get super older, like teenagers, they end up having just as much of an influence or more on our children and teenagers as we do, right? So we want to make sure that we know the people that are around them and know that those people are making good choices. If you're able to get to know the friend's parents, that's also a good idea, right? Because you can make sure that, the kids are being properly supervised at their house. Um, I know that, back in the day, whenever we were coming up, if I wanted to spend the night at my best friend's house, my mom would call her mom, right? And talk about, like, hey, Beth really wants to stay at Amanda's house. Is it okay? And there was that communication between parents. So if you can get to know child's friends' parents, then again, kind of keeping that communication open is going to be really important. And monitoring the use of electronics or their belongings. Okay, so I know that this is a little bit controversial, right? So, we want privacy, and a lot of us believe that our children deserve privacy, which they do, but they don't necessarily deserve the same level of privacy that we do as adults, right? Because as parents and guardians, it's our job to make sure that they are safe, right? And sometimes that means trust but verify, right? We trust that they're doing the right thing, but we're also going to verify that and making sure that they are making good choices. So, kind of monitoring their electronics. So, whether it is a cell phone or, other laptop or something else like that, you can use parental controls to make sure that you can block content that you don't think is appropriate for them. Um, just monitoring, making sure that they are making good choices online, on social media platforms, or whatever they are on. Okay. So just kind of keeping an eye out, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you have concerns or you think that your student might be using or doing something else, it's okay for you to look through their belongings, okay? Looking through their room or cleaning out their backpack or something else like that. So, a little parent tip here is if you start earlier, right? So, if as a child, you are starting with your children, and okay, once a week, me and mom are going to work together and we're going to clean my room, then you're able to kind of look around and see what's going on, period. But that's normal, right? We're setting the standard. Again, these things are so much easier whenever we put them to place in the beginning. Me personally, so I provide my kids with cell phones because I need to be able to contact them if they're out of the house, right? So whenever I gave them the cell phone, it was with the understanding that these are my cell phones. And so I'm going to put whatever blockers I need to on that cell phone to make sure that you're making the best choices that you can, as well as it being my cell phone, I can look through it whenever I need to, right? So they know that anytime, they unlock their phone or they give mom the passcode, right? I have their passcodes so that I can just kind of check in and make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Trust but verify. Okay, so another protective factor, okay, discussing your expectations and values regarding alcohol and drug use. So you'll notice here that I have a graph. This is from data from 2020. They didn't really have a good graph for this year that I wanted to use. But I wanted to show you that it is so important that we talk to our kids about our disapproval of alcohol and other drug use. Okay, so what this graph does is it shows that the more that you talk to your kid about, like, I expect you not to use these substances, the less likely your child is to use. So notice here, for students who were taught that using alcohol was very wrong, 93% of the time will not touch alcohol. Okay. So we think that our children don't hear us. They do. Okay. They might roll your eyes at you, or they might tell you, Mom, stop, or whatever, but they are listening. Okay. So you notice that the use ends up increasing whenever they're not quite sure. So if they're not sure if their parents think it's wrong or not, then they are 50-50 chance of whether or not they're going to drink alcohol. Okay, so making sure that you're talking to them about your values and your expectations regarding them not using substances. Now, a lack of discussion sends a message too. So I wanted to address this because a lot of people have the approach of don't ask, don't tell for their kids, right? Like, okay, I'm not going to bring it up. I don't want to put any ideas in their head. Well, let me tell you that our students know. Okay, they have heard about drugs. whenever I go into fifth and sixth grade classrooms for lessons, they've heard things, they know things. Okay, so you're not going to be introducing anything to them whenever by the time they're like fifth or sixth grade. Okay, so talking to them before that is important, again, because we want to make sure they get the information from us. But if we're not talking to them about important things, okay, so if you talk to them about being nice to other people, if you talk to them about not bullying, right? If you talk to them about all of these other important topics, but you don't talk to them about drugs, then they're going to think that it doesn't matter, right? They're going to think that, hey, mom talked to me about all of these other topics, but she didn't talk to me about drugs, so she must not care if I use. All right. So it is very important that we do talk to our kids because not talking to them sends a message too. And again, I know we feel like our kids don't listen to us, or our kids might roll their eyes or do the, oh, mom, I know, right? I think that was pretty spot on because my teenager, that sounds exactly like my teenager. Mom, I know. But it's, they do hear us and they are listening to what we're telling them. All right, so another prevention strategy is to get your child or teenagers involved with some kind of sport or activity or club and something that they're interested in, okay? Because remember how we talked about social isolation, not being accepted by others as a huge risk factor for substance use, right? So if we're getting them involved in an activity that they enjoy doing, then first of all, that gives them something to do, right? They're not out running the streets or making bad choices, but it also gives them a positive peer group, okay? Gives them a group of people that have a common interest. It gives them something to be a part of, right? And ultimately, that gives them a sense of feeling and belonging and acceptance. So, whether it is inside of school or after school activities or, outside of school, it doesn't matter. Just kind of letting them be involved in the things that they are interested in. So a lot of the schools, even elementary schools, at least in the Mount Vernon Pyramid, I can't speak to other schools, but many schools have after-school programs. So they have different clubs or activities, and then starting in middle school, they have sports programs, right? So allowing them to just kind of stay after school to do these things could be helpful. So, having family meals together. Again, this is another thing that is like super easy. We're making dinner anyways, or we're bringing dinner home, right? So having family meals together. So everybody's sitting down and eating at the table together at the same time. So without any like cell phones or TV or any other distractions, right? So noticing here, it says that 72% of teenagers think that eating together is important. So this is a big study, right? 72% of teenagers think eating together is important. Now, none of the teenagers I know are going to admit that they think it's important, right? They're going to say it's stupid or they're going to roll their eyes at you because that's what they do. They're teenagers, right? But it really does make a difference. So I've always had, sit down family meals with my kids from the time that they were in their high chairs, right? So we've always sat down to eat as a family. So even on nights whenever I have to work late, my kids are still sitting down and eating together. Okay. So the thing about it is that our food isn't magic, right? But what it is, it's what's happening during dinner time. We're not sitting there and just eating and shoveling our faces. Usually we're having a discussion, right? We're talking about what's going on in our lives. We're asking, how was your day? What was the good parts of your day, right? So we are connecting, and that is super important. So it does say that teens who eat with their families are half as likely to use drugs. Okay, so if just sitting down and eating dinner together or breakfast, okay, it doesn't matter what the meal is, doesn't matter if it is pizza or if it is a four-course gourmet meal, because we all have time to make gourmet meals, right? It doesn't matter because as long as we're just sitting down together and spending time together, that's what really matters. Okay, so it promotes connection with others in the family. I realize that, between all of our activities, you might have kids going to different sports or whatever. So I know that it might not be realistic to do every single night, but just making the time whenever you are able to. Again, it doesn't matter if it is breakfast only on the weekends, but just being able to sit down together is important. Okay, so prepare your child for peer pressure. So this is going to be super duper important. We do talk about this in the schools. So I know that, from elementary schools, the guidance counselor goes in and talks about, peer pressure and stuff. But it is really important that they also hear it from home, right? We want to be sending the same messages between home and school. We want them to get all that consistent messaging between us, right? So talking to them about how others might try to convince them to try things, right? So talk to them about making those difficult choices, how hard it is to say no to their friends or to their peers, right? So recognizing that it's not easy, but this is also really important. Talk to them about positive friends. So about how good friends aren't going to try and force you or coerce you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with. Okay. And how do we make sure that we have positive friends? So talking to them about what that looks like. Good friends are going to help you make good choices and not bad choices. You can also talk about the difference between positive peer pressure and negative peer pressure too. All right. So letting them know that positive peer pressure is going to be our students telling our students it's okay to tell your friends, like encourage your friends to do their homework. It's okay to encourage your friends to make good choices, right? But it's not okay to try to get people to do things that they don't feel comfortable with, right? Or things that they know are wrong. Practice how to say no. So in teaching your kid and preparing your child for peer pressure, also talking to them about like what they can do, but tell them how, teach them the skills, role play with them, practice with them. Tell them, like I tell my children, you can blame it on me. For any excuse, anything that you don't feel comfortable doing, blame it on me. You can tell my kids will tell their friends, my mom is crazy, because I know all of their friends, right? So, my mom is crazy. I would be in so much trouble if I did that, right? So I always tell my children they can blame anything on me. A couple of weeks ago, my daughter, my 16-year-old, has a friend who's really draining for her. And she was like, Mom, I really don't want to go to the mall with her. She's just draining me. I need time out. Can I blame it on you? And I said, absolutely. So she was like, oh, my mom's tripping. I can't go to the mall with you. Okay. So telling your kids that they can always blame you, but helping them come up with other options too. Saying, if you vape, it's going to be really bad for your health, or it's going to make your breath stink. So just preparing them so that they're ready to confront these things if they're ever faced with it. So teaching emotional regulation. Okay. So, not knowing how to identify and manage their feelings is one of the main reasons why students try substances in the first place. Okay. I cannot tell you how many students I have worked with that have talked about how they tried vaping or marijuana because their friend told them it's going to help me calm down, it's going to help you feel better. Okay. It'll help you forget your problems. So, we need to teach our kids how to identify their feelings. So, teach them the feeling words, right? So, teaching them beyond like happy, mad, sad, but frustrated, teaching them all of those underlying emotions too. Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are amazing at this. So, that could be a good time, a teachable moment to kind of watch that movie together and talk about the different emotions, right? Um, but we need them to know the feeling words and to help them identify how it feels in their body, right? So recognizing the different signs of these different feelings. So for example, whenever I'm working with students and we're talking about like how not to use substances or how to calm ourselves down, we talk about what anger feels like for them, right? We talk about what happens in their body when they feel angry. So a lot of times they have a hard time identifying that, like what is actually going on. So I'm like, okay, what happens with you? Do you get hot? Do you clench your fist? Do you get tense in your shoulders? Like, do you feel like you have steam coming out, right? So just helping them to identify what is happening in their body, because if we can name it and we can identify it, we can tame it. All right. And then teaching them positive ways to calm themselves down. If teenagers are using because they've got big emotions and they don't know how to manage it, if they're using substances because of that, then if we're teaching them positive ways to calm themselves down, then they're less likely to go to those bad ways like using substances, right? So, some strategies that you can teach can be like deep breathing techniques, right? So, teaching them to do belly breathing. You can teach them to take a break, right? Leaving a situation and taking a moment to calm themselves down. They can write down their feelings, right? They can go for a walk. So that walking provides that physical activity, that bilateral stimulation to help them calm down. And believe it or not, smelling essential oils. So, smell is the quickest way to get from your emotional brain to your thinking brain. So, having them smell something that they really like to smell. So, especially if it's like a lavender or an orange or something like that, can help knock them out of that emotional brain. And finally, be the model. Okay. So, as parents and caregivers, we are our children's like first teachers in life, right? So they learn by the what we teach them or by watching what we do and what we say. So it's really important that we're mindful about how we talk in front of our kids, especially about different substances. Okay. So I've heard my friends say, oh, it's been a long day. I need a drink. Right. Or, oh my goodness, it's been a week. I need a drink. I gotta relax. And our kids are hearing that, right? And so they're making a connection like, oh, if I want to relax, then I need to drink, right? So, just kind of being aware of the way that we are talking about substances. So we should try our best, right, to be good role models for our children because our children are going to pick up our qualities and our habits. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So it's important that we try to model the positive behaviors that we want to see in them. All right, so as we are wrapping up this part, I want to leave you with some key takeaways from this discussion, right? So, key takeaway, keep calm, okay? Keep calm while we're having the conversation. Seek to understand. We're listening, we're understanding. Keep communication open. So, we want to have a discussion as often as possible, and we want to make sure we're answering their questions, right? We're having smaller, more frequent conversations and modeling the behavior that you want to see. So there are my sources. Before we get to questions, I do want to, this is my contact information. So if you have any questions of anything that we discussed, please reach out and let me know. I am going to be giving a handout. Of all the information that I talked about today, just a quick overview of all of the different strategies and stuff. And I highly encourage you to check out the Office of Student Safety and Wellness website. So on there, on that website, there is information on well, there's the information for the Substance Abuse Prevention Program, which I'm part of. It talks about different strategies for prevention. It gives information about different substances, but also on the I'm sorry, Office of Student Safety and Wellness website, there's a lot of information about wellness. So calming strategies and things that FCPS is putting into place to help our kids be their best selves, right, for wellness. So please feel free to check those out. So I guess now would be a great time to start our Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Beth. So, the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says chat and a button that says Q&A. Please feel free to type your questions into either of those, and we will go ahead and read through them.
Questions you may have about the information I shared today, or about the substance abuse prevention program, anything about drugs that I can answer, anything at all. Melanie, I appreciate it. See a question. Any books you recommend for little ones? Oh, I recommend any information about like how to calm themselves down, like any of like the anger books or the calming books. Oh, any books specifically about peer pressure? I cannot think of any off the top of my head. If you reach out, I can definitely look and I can send you a list, Melanie. I definitely have some. I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
So there's another question. My son is a freshman at South Lakes, often refers to kids vaping in the bathroom. He did a presentation on vaping and has often said that he thinks the behavior is gross. However, we are all vulnerable when it comes to temptation. I'm wondering how to start the dialogue about how he feels about drugs.
Okay, so it sounds like he already thinks that it's pretty gross. So you've already got a good hold in there. You said he did a presentation on vaping for prevention. So I mean just use that momentum that he's already got, okay? Talking to him about maybe talking to the principal about what strategies to use to help others make better choices in school. We do hear a lot of the time, a lot of the students I talk to are like, everybody's vaping in the bathroom all the time, right? So, talking to your admin about those concerns and allowing them to put strategies in place to address those issues. So just talk to your kid. Talk to him about, how he feels about that vaping. Clearly, he thinks it's gross. So talking to him about the things that he has within his control. If he sees somebody vaping in the bathroom, to turn around and go and report it, right? We always tell our kids, if you see something, say something. In each of the there are like places that they can report things online anonymously too. So I would definitely suggest, just continue strengthening those skills with him, but telling him to let people know what's going on and to maybe address, how he can handle things in school. It sounds like he's a really good kid, right? And he wants to do something. So use that momentum. Talk to him about what he thinks would be helpful for him and just keep on going with some of the strategies that we talked about. Keep it calm, talking to him about what he believes and what he can do and how he can help his peers.
So there's another question that's come in about, can you share a bit more about how to help a child that's a huge people pleaser and how to deal with peer pressure?
Okay, yeah, that is one of the biggest problems, is dealing with that peer pressure. So it's really difficult whenever we have those kids that are people pleasers. So just kind of encouraging them to be helpful, but not in a way that's going to damage their health, or so giving them alternatives. So, okay, we really want to help people out. Let's do that by performing random acts of kindness, right? Let's help people out. Let's, give people a positive view of us by doing good things. And just kind of reinforcing and teaching those skills to them, telling them like a real friend is not going to encourage you to do things that are that are wrong, or things that are gonna hurt your body. helping them to build their self-esteem. So a lot of the peer pressure and the giving into peer pressure is because of that lack of self-esteem. So helping them feel good about themselves, finding those things that they do like about themselves. So reinforcing all of those positive skills are going to help them be able to say no better. I know that a lot of schools, a lot of school counselors at the elementary school and the middle school levels, they do end up like doing smaller groups. So maybe that's a discussion. You can put your kid into one of those groups to be able to reinforce their skills for self-esteem or for addressing peer pressure to be able to say no.
I see that this parent also asked for book recommendations. I also wanted to mention that at the Family Resource Center, we do have a library with adult and children's books. So I'll put in the chat our email address, and families can reach out to us through email to ask for book recommendations on those topics, as well as um, emailing Beth directly for
Mhm.
some book recommendations. So another question is, my daughter will be going to middle school next year, and I found this information very helpful. My friend, oh, sorry, this is not a question, it's a comment, but my friend recently told me about kids cutting myself, and that scares me.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Beth.
Sure, absolutely. Because a lot of the cutting and stuff is not for they're not trying to kill themselves, but it's to release pain, right? So if we are teaching them how to identify pain, right? We're teaching them how to identify those different feelings within themselves and being able to teach them how to manage those feelings. That can actually reduce those risky behaviors too. So, including cutting. So, all of the strategies I gave today, I was talking about it as prevention for substance use, but these are actually prevention strategies for all risky behaviors, including cutting and things of that nature. Okay. So, using a lot of these strategies is specifically teaching those skills. The skill building is going to be super, super helpful because we want to increase their confidence. We want to increase their ability to manage those tough feelings that they have. Okay, so all of those things are going to help reduce those risky behaviors, including cutting. So thank you for helping me make that connection, Rebecca. That was great.
Another question, my child is 8 and we have a loved one, not a relative, who is an alcoholic. We see them a few times a year. When or how do I broach the topic? This particular person has a health issue and it seems difficult from talking about our family history because he is not family.
Mhm. Okay. So I get that, but you can still make that connection to this is a person that we love and that we care about. Okay. So addressing it from the point of view that, sometimes people that we care about struggle with these things and it is a disease. Okay. So trying to take away that stigma from like, oh, drug users are bad, alcoholics are bad, but we want to approach it from a place of love, like saying, this person that we really care about is struggling with an addiction, which is a disease, right? So you can still address it from a very caring perspective and like talking about how, like there are some choices that, this person might make. And even though it's not a relative, this is still a person that is impacting our lives. So you can use it as like a teachable experience without addressing it as like a family history type ordeal, because they can still make that connection because they still see this person.
Thank you. I'm also putting the evaluation information into the chat for families if you can click that link and evaluate the webinar. We'll leave it open for a few more minutes for questions. Um, please feel free to type in the chat or the Q&A any questions that you have.
And if you have any questions you don't feel comfortable putting out there now, please feel free to reach out and email me. I'm more than happy to help however I can.
Yeah, questions typed into the Q&A are anonymous and they will only be seen by the presenter. So
And just a reminder too is that there is one of me. So there's a substance abuse prevention specialist in each high school pyramid. So we cover the high school, the middle school, and all of the feeder schools to that high school. So I am for the Mount Vernon pyramid schools. But if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to me, you can always ask me who your SAPS is, and I can hook you up with them so they can provide any information or if there's anything, if you need any resources from them or any help from them, you can reach out to your SAPs directly too.
So seeing no further questions at this time, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much, Beth, for being here today, and for sharing your contact information, allowing families to reach out directly. We look forward to seeing many of you on a future webinar. Have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.